Hello. Thank you very, very much. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you about how now, toward the end of the day, when you're feeling maybe a little bit like, where's the next batch of coffee coming from, and kind of your brain is full and you're kind of in that like post-lunch slump, I'm going to build on all of that, apparently, and talk with you about how we can slow things down, but only when it's appropriate. And I should put a caveat out there and say I've always been a fan of anticipation and slower experiences. And I have very, very happy memories of, and my husband has very horrible memories of, a hike that we took several years ago that it was on the way to something else, and we saw it listed in a guidebook, and it was supposed to be like 45 minutes. It took us 5 hours. And they were 5 glorious hours. Like, I met some dogs along the way. I had a camera on me. I was stopping to take a lot of pictures. And I think, really, if you ask him, he's like, oh my God, why did it take us so long? It was only supposed to be 45 minutes. And I'm like, it was awesome. 5 hours of awesome. And I love that because I think that in many cases, and again, not all the time, not all experiences need to be 5-hour hikes, but in many cases, it's that sense of anticipation that builds into the experience. It's not so much that it's all about the journey and not the destination, but oftentimes when we focus on the journey, it allows us to then appreciate the end product, maybe appreciate the experience that much more. And I think for many of our users, for many of the brands that we counsel and whatnot, the same holds true for them, but only if we afford them the time and space to luxuriate in an experience, or maybe just the time and space to take in information and build memories and learn through discovery. Now, I've always been a fan of those kinds of experiences. In 1982, my parents stuck me in the back seat of a Chevy Citation and said, we were going to Disney World. And I lived in upstate New York. Disney World, as you may know, is in Central Florida. So it was 3 days in the back seat of a Chevy Citation. And it was 1982, so I don't think there was air conditioning, or at least there was not in that car. But it was fabulous. I loved it because there was so much to see along the way. And also, and I think maybe this is a little bit of foreshadowing to then what my mom would later pack in my lunches a few years later, we had just discovered Little Debbie's little chocolate snack cakes, and I remember really enjoying those in the backseat of the car without a lot of supervision. So for 3 days, backseat of the Chevy Citation, we saw so much stuff go past the windows. And if you've ever done that ride, you might be familiar with one of the things that you see along the way is south of the border. And it's this tacky, glorified roadside amusement park that's just below the border, just after the border from North Carolina to South Carolina. And it's amazing, or at least the advertisements for it are truly amazing. And the thing that sets it apart from other roadside attractions is how they build anticipation. So in 1982, if you were driving from New York to Central Florida, driving past south of the border, on 95 southbound, you would see about 50 billboards, just on the southbound side alone. So long before this was a thing on the internet, I-95 was pioneering pop-up ads. So along the way, I'm seeing these amazing ads, and I was begging my parents to stop, and those billboards were cheesy. South of the border is tacky, as is their advertising, so I guess maybe points for consistency at least. They love the puns, and they use this character, Pedro, as their main character. And it was this incredibly racist, lazy caricature, but it kind of fit with their theme. I mean, even like their typography was lazy, and their puns were lazy. But I was 4, so I didn't care. I was 4, so I loved them. So I don't know, maybe learn better, do better. South of the border did not necessarily do better, though. Some of them, they even say like, hey, kid in the back seat, keep screaming, because they know their audience. It is the kid in the back seat of that Chevy Citation who's constantly asking, are we there yet and all. And they make you want to get there. They make you want to stop. I so wanted to go, and I so wanted my parents to stop, and we never stopped. My parents maybe knew better, maybe they just had a sense of taste and decency. But those puns were not effective. They didn't really do anything to help their cause, to help my cause there in the back seat. They didn't offer any additional content because they weren't offering the right content at the right time to the actual target audience of my parents that were making these decisions. So despite those 50-some billboards on I-95, it wasn't the right content at the right time because it was not right for the context that we were in and the mindset that we had of like, let's just make time and hurry and get to Florida already because there's no air conditioning. So instead, we can learn from this example, maybe learn a little something good, take away something good from south of the border, because I don't think anybody ever has. But we here can, and we can learn that if we're creating the right content for people, we have to understand who those people are. We need to offer them the right content for their decision-making context, and really choose an angle for that content, determine what it needs to do, and then give it the time and space to do that. So let's keep scooting down I-95 now. Now we get to Disney World, we go to Epcot. We see the Epcot Test Track attraction. Now this is something that launched years ago. It was originally sponsored by General Motors. Turns out a lot of the rides and experiences and shows at Disney World are sponsored by different corporations. And several years ago, the Chevrolet sub-brand took it over from General Motors. And when they did that and they started investing more money in it, they didn't actually invest anything in the ride itself. Instead, they invested everything into the pre-ride experience to make sure that was engaging. Because if somebody was going to be waiting on a line anyhow, they wanted to make sure that it really served the experience, served the sense of wonder that they wanted to instill. So if we take a look at all those people that were standing there, you can see them all. They're waiting in line to go in. But there's a lot more going on there. This guy here in the foreground, he's taking pictures of some of the model cars that are on display. That girl there at the kiosk, she is modeling a car that she then wants to put through its paces and see how it compares to some of the other vehicles within the attraction. So there's a lot going on in terms of learning and discovery. Those people that are waiting in a line, or I guess since I'm in New York, I can say this, those people that are waiting on a line, I know my prepositions here, they're doing a lot more. They're engaged in the experience. They're discovering what's going to be coming next. They're also building memories, creating memories. And I don't mean memories in that, like, come to Disney World and make memories with your family this summer, or go to south of the border and do the same and get some fireworks. But instead, they're going through that process of laying down initial neural pathways and then building on top of them, because that's the only way that we learn and retain information, by getting a little bit, laying that into things that we already know, and then getting a little bit more and laying on top of that. So those people are really in the moment. By waiting on the line, they get the opportunity to do this. So what we can take from that is that those people on the line, they're getting that much more out of the experience because of the content that's in it. The verbal content, the visual content, the organization of information, and how all of those different car models are presented to them and how they can interact with it. And this is something that I want to build off of what Henri said, that it's our perception of the experience that matters so much more than the actual speed of perception in that experience. Now, I spoke about this a little bit with Carrie Mahala. You might be familiar with her work. She's a content strategist. She currently helps lead the team at LinkedIn. She's also a huge Disney aficionado. She grew up kind of in the shadow of Disneyland in California, has been there literally dozens of times, might be like hundreds of times now, but I don't know how much she feels comfortable acknowledging that. Not that there's anything bad with that. But she said about this idea of the new line and the way the experience on that line has changed, that yeah, you wait longer in it, but you're engaged in the experience long before you get to the ride itself. You're invested in the experience. And kind of contrasting her perception, I also spoke with Jared Spool about this, who leads UIE. And he talked a lot about his experience in designing for wait times and designing for anticipation and designing for speed of interaction for clients like Best Buy and Amazon. And he noted that when people have a frustrating experience, then they say it's slow. It's not the other way around. It's not that, oh, that was slow, so I hated it, but rather, that was miserable, so it took forever. If you've ever waited online at the DMV or RMV, depending on where you live, you know even if it goes by quickly, you're still like, that was horrible and it took forever. Because it's our perception of the speed that matters so much more than the actual speed. So we should ask from this, is it enough simply just to speed up the experience? If people find frustrating things slow, it begs the investigation. Do we then find slow, deep experiences frustrating? And furthermore, do we make better decisions if they're just those kind of snap decisions? Let's take a look at Amazon. So they offer that buy now with one click button. That's great if you know exactly what you want. They don't want to put any speed bumps in front of you, and you're like, let me just get the dog treats in my cart. Maybe it's your dog that's using the computer and is like mashing the keys with his paws and saying, give me that in the cart now. So they have that buy now with one click button. That's great, except that it's not always effective. It turns out, they've seen from their user data and their analytics, that people mess up in hitting that button a million different ways, or at least a dozen different ways. They sometimes send it to the wrong address, or they realize it's going to get there later than they want it, and maybe they could get those dog treats more quickly if they just go down to a corner store and get them. Sometimes it's just the wrong product, and they were like, I didn't mean to do that. So there's a million ways to undo that. So the fact that we find those frustrating things slow, let's go back and ask, do we find slow, deep experience that maybe aren't optimized for efficiency? Do we find those things really frustrating? When we've invested a lot of time in something, do we look back and we're like, that was horrible? Nope, and YouTube is a testament to that. If you look here, we've got an almost 7-minute video of 2 dogs dining with people hands, and almost 17, or more than 17 million of us have invested time in that. And I use the term investment loosely here, but maybe this is important research to somebody. And we go down these YouTube rabbit holes, not because we think, this is horrible, I'm gonna spend more time on it. We go down those rabbit holes not even realizing that we're investing more and more time. And this should be miserable, but it's not, because it's dogs with people hands. So we know that users can value slow, enduring experiences. Remember when we used to think that, nobody's going to read long-form content online because it's online, and then suddenly we were like, wait, when are we not online? When are we going to be reading those long think pieces? But apparently we do. And we get really engaged in the material if it's presented in a way that is optimized for the reading experience. We learn to anticipate what'll come next, look forward to maybe the next page or the next chapter, or if we're going through like a wizard tool, what's going to happen next in that process. And we create those memories. We lay down those neural networks. We go through this process of discovery and learning, and we also learn to focus in the experience and focus in the moment and take that much more from that experience. Ikea does a great job with this. Here we see the map from an Ikea, I believe in Helsinki, and just like any Ikea in the world, they take you on that circuitous path so that you too can discover exactly what chair will make you whole. Now, if you need the shortcut, if you're like, don't put the speed bumps in front of me, don't make me look at the Pwang sitting machine yet again, as mesmerizing it as it is, you can scoot ahead to, I think they call it the little marketplace area. So for the lower price point items, for things that don't require that second glance or additional research, you can do that quickly. And on many of the websites that we design, we want to be able to optimize for people's time, and we want to make sure that those experiences can be efficient. But not everything needs to be like that. And if you think back to brick and mortar experiences, I don't know if anyone here has ever gone into a physical store where there's people, which sometimes, yes, sucks, because you're like, hell is other people, and they're standing in front of me at the checkout line. Come on, man. But if you've ever done that, you might see how like a shopkeeper, if you're walking around with like a pair of pants, like you're just like lost in the clothing department, sometimes they'll come up and say, you know, a shirt that will match that perfectly is on sale right now. Let me have you spend a little bit more time in this department. We're going to put that other product in your hand as well to feel the fabric, to interact with it, to think about maybe if you also need to buy socks that match that pair of pants or something. I do most of my shopping online, so I don't know, socks, whatever. But if you go through that experience in the real world, there's no reason why it can't work effectively online for many brands as well. So if you want to take users through this kind of process, if you want to help them explore, learn through discovery, and drive more deliberate choices and help them focus, there are a number of things that we can do. And I look at those sort of interaction opportunities through the lens of design and content strategy because that's my area of focus. And when I talk about content strategy, I don't mean content marketing, but this definitely abuts content marketing. This is the definition that I always go back to that came out of in 2009, the Content Strategy Consortium. You'll notice it does not include the term copywriting because that's just one of the ways in which content strategy is made manifest, but we'll talk about that too. So first, how do we slow down users? One way is through editorial style and structures and the way in which we pull them through verbal content. So one of my favorite examples is from Crutchfield. They sell home audio, car audio, electronics, photography equipment. If you're looking for a new camera or a new camera lens, you might go there and learn about your options, kind of see through the process of discovery what different lenses could do for you. Crutchfield does a nice job of offering this information through a slower, more conversational experience. They're not afraid of long sentences with multiple clauses in them, where they're speaking in the first person, talking about, well, here was my experience with this particular lens on my camera. So it's a more intimate, familiar, engaging kind of experience through their editorial style and through those long conversational sentences. You can see here where they're talking about, in this kind of like garden path sentence, the act of choosing a lens, how it can be a daunting task for, we're going to reference some other stuff up on the page. And here, look at me talking in the first person, talking about what I pulled together from my own experiences, using some colloquial language. All things that help support the shopping experience. Not always the buying experience, but it's right for their users who are researching the product long before they buy. Fidelity does this too, and in a very kind of strategic way. So if you land on the homepage, if you're an investor with Fidelity, you're going to see some very short nomenclature, very terse links like why choose it, bond market insights, retirement funds, trading, labels that you'll be able to understand if you're in their target audience. But let's say you want to go down a path that is not quite as expedient and maybe work through a tougher decision. Maybe you want to pull money out of your 401k early. Now, this is something that if you work with an accountant or if you've ever heard like an accountant preach at you and you're like, I just want to have more money because Easter candy is about to go on sale. Why can't I pull this out of my 401k? Not to speak from personal experience or anything. You might hear very cautious tones of like why that's a really bad idea, because you'll be hit with really stiff penalties. And even if you're in a pretty tight situation now economically, think hard before you pull money out of tax-deferred retirement savings. Again, it's something that accountants and financial advisors really, really caution against. And they usually slow down their speech if you're having a personal conversation with somebody and maybe talk in more kind of cagey, dulcet tones. Fidelity does this on their website as well. Now, they could just put up maybe a big red blinking, don't stop, don't think about doing that, which would be really kind of alarmist, not in line with their brand, and really condescending. For their audience, they don't want to just offer them a big condescending, don't. Instead, they want to educate them out of this decision. So they use long sentences, long paragraphs, and when they actually go through the process of withdrawing from their 401k or IRA, it's a multi-step, multi-screen process so that there are lots of opportunities to revisit your gut instinct and think, maybe I don't want to do this. Now, Patagonia, just to move from something that deals with a lot of money to something else that deals with a lot of money, Patagonia also goes through this kind of experience. When somebody's thinking about buying a product from them, they know that it's kind of a higher price point. So they want to make sure that people slow down and consider the purchase. This is not something that is right for every brand. It's something that would be sort of anathema to many brands to want to encourage somebody to consider what they're buying before they actually buy it. But for Patagonia, it makes sense. Now, they could describe their products in maybe terse copy and a list of bullet points of the attributes. But again, it's not quite right for them. They know that their audience likes to read, likes to revel in the details about how they might use a product. So they offer them stuff that sounds like it's ripped from the pages of the J. Peterman catalog, with springtime shaded ballets at the creek, the pre-dawn starts in the Canadian Rockies, and hut tours in the High Sierra, blah, 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 made from 100% polyester. So hot right now. And that's right for them. It's kind of that warm sweater that gets warmer with age. And those long sentences help to pull somebody into the details so that they become immersed in liking the idea of the product, even as much as they want to buy the product. They do that now even if you go deeper into the shopping cart. So they're offering a lot of content to further describe the experience through their instructional copy, through their error messages, so that it's not just really terse, but really guides somebody in the experience. So I also want to look at discovery-oriented content types, because I think that's a tactic that we sometimes see in very surprising contexts, namely in the shopping cart. So something about Patagonia. They sell a fairly expensive array of products. They know that it's a product array and a price point that resonates with their target audience. They also offer something else, and that's free shipping both ways, much like you might get with Amazon Prime. They offer the free shipping both ways because they want to make sure that their audience is happy with the products that they buy. That if you get a jacket and you're like, oh, I just dropped a few $100s in this thing, but I don't love it, that you can send it back. So it's great from the customer service side of things, not great from the environmental side of things. And Patagonia is a company that really believes in its environmental mission as well. And they realize it's a pretty big carbon footprint if you're constantly sending products back and forth. So they actually merchandise in the shopping cart and encourage you to really make sure that you're on board with that product that you're about to buy. Do you want to consider it maybe in another color? Do you want to maybe like rethink the size, take another look at our size charts so that you get it right? And in that effort, they're really helping someone focus their attention and go through that cycle, go through that validation cycle of, is this what I want? Because every time you look back in the shopping cart and it's still there, it's a chance to check in with those gut instincts and develop more courage in your convictions and say, yes, this is the $200 jacket that I want. You go through that cycle of deliberation and validation and kind of reaffirming your convictions. But that only happens if we give our consumers and our users the time and space to consider that jacket purchase again, to maybe reconsider withdrawing from their 401k by offering them the time and the content to evaluate. Now, as far as kind of continuing on that path of discovery, if you go into REI, maybe you're thinking about buying a new backpack. You might go through the process of pulling a few different backpacks off the rack, and you can pick up weighted bean bags to put in them to see, well, what does it feel like to have a 15-pound pack on your back and walk around with that, or to have 20 pounds of bean bag weight on your back and walk around with that. Obviously, you can't do that on the website. Next best thing is offering reviews, people talking about their experience carrying that much weight, and allowing you to drag different products in, the same way you might pull them off the rack, pull them off the shelf, drag them into a way to then compare on those different attributes. It's encouraging that level of interaction because you have to do the process of dragging it into your cart. Ikea also online, the same as in store, they encourage that process of interacting with the content, moving things around. If you want to see what can live inside this bookcase, you can swipe on it, manually kind of drag across different doors, see what's in there. So they're encouraging that level of interaction. And of course, they could also communicate this same type of information maybe by listing out the cubic capacity of that particular bookcase. They could do that, but instead they're saying, you do it. See for yourself. Drag your hands digitally across this and see what happens. And it's that level of interaction that so beautifully mimics the in-store experience that has worked so well for them as well as more traditional brands, where a shopkeeper might come up and say, hey, let me put this product in your hands so that you can see what it feels like, what it looks like. Take it for a spin yourself. So finally, I also want to look at the role of long-form content. And I say that it's both visual and verbal because there's definitely an equivalent between long pages of prose and really visually rich information that we see in photography too. So looking back at REI, if you're considering maybe buying a backpack for your dog, it used to be that you could go into the store, bring your dog in, fit them into a little doggy backpack and all, see what was the right level of weight for them, if they were going to be carrying their treats or not. Big fan of making your dog carry their own treats because it's a huge psychological thing that you're doing on them by making them do the work for the food. But you can't do that anymore. For the past few years, you haven't been able to bring your dog into REI unless it was a service animal. So now you have to do a lot of your shopping for your dog on the website, and that's fine. And maybe, again, they're mashing the keyboard with their paws. And that's great. And this can be an aspect of content marketing, and it can serve that purpose too. But by offering all of this kind of long content that helps you understand how you might suit your dog up to go hiking with you and all, they're able to also empower their consumers with this kind of information so that you can get the right product, or consider maybe your dog is not really cut out for the lifestyle of hiking, either for 45 minutes or 5 hours, if they're going to walk with you that long too. Crutchfield does this too. So going back to them, in addition to those long sentences, they string them together into long paragraphs and really long pages. So this is just a teeny little excerpt from way up there at the top, and you can see that page scrolls and scrolls and scrolls on. And those types of pages are really popular on their site. They see, looking at the analytics, that when users get to the bottom, what they tend to do then is say, show me more, I want to keep reading about these different camera lenses. And that's great because it's great for their users, it's great for their brand because they know their audience. It's people that like to research, that want to feel really confident about a purchase before they actually take out a credit card. I had the opportunity to sit down with Julie Dawson-Govan, their brand manager, and she talked about how they look at using content to build confidence, because they want to help people make better decisions. And sometimes those decisions are to say, oh, I'm not ready to buy right now. Sometimes it's from somebody saying, I'm considering this maybe $200 car stereo, and then they realize they could be happy with something that's just $45 or something like that. But they want to make sure that they're building confidence so that people that are then confident are happy. And what they get, what comes in the mail, is something that they can feel good about. So again, this goes beyond content marketing because some of this content isn't designed to sell a product or to even sell someone on a brand. Sometimes it's about just offering education so that the user can then feel that much more empowered, have that much greater courage in their own convictions. And when they can trust their own gut sensibility that much more, they can then sometimes reflect that trust back to the brands that they engage. So talking about a lot of content, voluminous content, we have to talk about America's Test Kitchen. Is anybody here a fan of America's Test Kitchen, Cooks Illustrated, any of their digital platforms and shows and whatnot? Great little iPhone apps. They do a lot because they earn attention, love, and a lot of loyalty by empowering their audiences. And the sort of stereotype of America's Test Kitchen is that when they say they're offering you the best ground beef chili recipe, it's because they've tried 950,000 versions of chili, and they've determined these are the variables that are key to making it the best. And in going through that process of testing out all those different recipes, they document the science behind it. They share those kinds of details. And in doing so, they're telling somebody, if you want to replicate this at home, if you want to replicate these tests yourself, you can do that, or you can just feel confident knowing that if you wanted to, those details are here. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes seeing that level of detail is enough to inspire confidence in your consumer. So they'll offer additional reading for people that want advanced techniques, or if it's somebody that's a total neophyte in the kitchen, they're able to walk them through it maybe just visually, maybe in a step-by-step kind of way. If you're using their iPhone app, instead of seeing all the long-form copy, they take every step and make sure that it's embedded in the caption for every photo. So you can find those swipeable recipes, you can find examples in their cooking school. There are a lot of different content types, and there's just a lot of different content for, again, supporting the kind of users that like the research, or at least like knowing that the research is there. I sat down with Jack Bishop, their Chief Creative Officer, and he commented on that approach, that thing that they're known for with creating that much content. And he said, yeah, we teach people to use all their senses, not just follow the recipe, because we want to make sure that they're successful and that success breeds confidence. So again, it goes back to helping people feel empowered by the content that they're consuming before the beef chili that they consume. Thank you. I didn't think that was that funny, but thank you. I guess this was like the workshopping the joke or something. Because Lord knows I don't workshop beef chili. So if we think about how slow experiences can support our users, support sometimes our consumers, just sometimes support our colleagues and peers that are on the other side of the interfaces that we design, we need to think about how we're empowering them. And I want to close with a couple other examples. So looking back at Patagonia, their content really helps people focus, to slow down, act deliberately, and focus on the information that they're taking, and whether that information is visual or verbal. They really honor their users' attention and kind of cultivate their attention and help them focus in that way. So as I said, they're also a company with a strong environmental bent. And they offer long-form copy that slows down the whole interaction experience in their blog about their different environmental efforts as well. And when you're there, they're not merchandising it and offering links to products in the sidebar or anything. They're not saying, if you're going to a protest this weekend, here's the perfect jacket to wear. Instead, they're letting you focus on just reading the information that they're producing. And then the same thing happens if you land on their page. You're not necessarily always seeing big product photography on the homepage. Instead, sometimes you're seeing some of the other photography that they commission from the different athletes that they sponsor and all, some of whom are alpine hikers and rock climbers. Incidentally, this is not at all like the 45-minute/5-hour hike that I took. It really should have been just 45 minutes. But here you can see the dense details in the imagery really invites somebody in. So there's definitely a strategy behind this style of photography and the way they use it in different ways across their site and across their print collateral. So I think it's worth asking. These are fine ideas that I certainly encourage with many of my clients for whom this kind of thinking is right. But we should ask if it works, if it pays off. So if we look at a sample from the Outdoor Industry Association, looking back at the last major recession, they did a report looking at how the outdoor recreation economy actually grew during that time. It grew at a rate of 5% year over year, which was terrific. REI did even better, though. They outpaced the industry average, and that's in large part due to the content that they were producing. Furthermore, if we compare REI to one of their closest competitors, Eastern Mountain Sports, REI was opening new stores at the same rate that EMS was closing stores, and every one of those stores was an additional outpost for product as well as content, whether you were reading information on the product hang tags or one of the curated product guides that they produced, or interacting with an employee in store who can offer you that same information in a more consultative experience. Every store offers an opportunity for more engagement, and that engagement was driving sales. And if we look back at one of the brands that they represent, again, going back to Patagonia, and talk with them about their content strategy, Bill Bolin there said that, yeah, our content strategy is really pretty simple. We want to stay close to our core market. And that core market loves that we've always had this literary storytelling component to our brand. It's in line with what we say, buy less stuff, make sure that what you buy lasts. They don't want you buying a product, reconsidering it at home, sending it back, buying another one. They just want you to get it right. They want to breed that kind of confidence. And he said, yeah, this does not help us move more product on a short-term basis, but we're not about just racking up ROI, because this kind of content is something that we enjoy, and the people that we make our clothes for, they enjoy it too. So this is kind of our Willy Loman moment. In Death of a Salesman, I think in the second act, Linda Loman looks across the stage at her husband, and she says, attention must be paid. This human, this user, this consumer is worthy of our attention. And if we're saying that everyone deserves respect, that we respect our users and their dignity, we need to also consider, do we respect the time that they invest in the experiences that we create? Do we need to ask them to maybe stay a little bit longer so that they can get more out of those experiences? Can we support their march toward dignity? Can we help them be there now? Whether that's looking at a blog about environmentalism where we're not taking the time to also merchandise in the sidebar, but instead focusing. Or that's looking at a product but making sure that the product is right. Are we helping them be successful? Are we helping them be there now? Are we able to take the time to do that as people that design and create content and structure for those experiences? Thank you.